Thank you for joining us for 3Bs on the Law podcast, hosted by Trisha Barita, Camille Canali, and Susan Dawson. Disclaimer, this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only, not meant to provide legal advice, and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Also remember, laws change or they differ by jurisdiction, so this is not a substitute for seeking legal counsel in your jurisdiction on the current law applicable to you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a special California edition of 3Bs on the Law. Today, I have one of the attorneys that I practice with, Saba Zafar, here to help me talk to you about the new ordinance that's going into effect in the city of LA on November 4th. So I think most people know that there is this mandatory proof of vaccination going into effect in Los Angeles counties for a lot of different places. And Sabah, I know that you have been doing a lot of work getting ready for this, drafting policies, and making sure employers are ready with forms for their customers to fill out. So let's first start, and why don't you tell us what establishments are covered by this new LA City Ordinance that actually goes into effect on November 4th?
Yeah, well, hello, everyone. It is really nice to be here today. The LA City Ordinance is definitely one of the more broader ones, and it covers a lot of different establishments. So first, all establishments where food or beverages are served, including restaurants, fast foods, bars, coffee shops, tasting rooms, hotels, wineries, distilleries, all of those are covered. Gyms, fitness venues, entertainment and recreation venues, and personal care establishments, including spas, nail salons, hair salons, barber shops, are all covered by the ordinance. What's not covered, by the way, are locations that do not have an indoor portion. So I think it's important for employers and establishments to remember that the point of the ordinance is to cover establishments that have an indoor portion.
Yeah, and shopping malls are covered too here, I understand.
They are, absolutely, yes.
So those of you who are getting ready to do your Christmas shopping, be prepared if you're not going to do it online. I think there's really two key components to this. Well, actually three. One is the employees that need to be vaccinated, and you need to have your employee vaccination policy in place.
Absolutely, yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, you definitely need to have this policy in place because employees need to know what to expect and how this ordinance affects them.
But you also now, there's a second component to this, and this is you have to have a policy in place for how your employees are going to go about checking to see whether patrons actually are vaccinated and what they need to do if they're not.
That's right. You essentially need two different policies. And for your employees, you might even need a training guide for them, right? How are you going to train your employees about how to approach different patrons about this? And I think that's also an important component in addition to the policies.
And then the last component that I want to talk about, and I think probably the most misunderstood component of this, is what to do if someone's not vaccinated and they request a reasonable accommodation. This is, I think, what is causing the most confusion amongst employers, both with respect to their employees and their customers alike.
It really is, because reasonable accommodation is so fact specific that it changes from establishment to establishment, from one patron to another patron. And the problem is that this ordinance doesn't really cover reasonable accommodations and what the reasonable accommodation is properly and adequately for establishments to really decide what they can and can't do. And so the best thing that establishments can really do is really deal with that on a case-by-case basis, depending on what type of establishment they have. For example, a restaurant might be able to provide different sorts of reasonable accommodations in comparison to a store where there's a back office and someone's working in the back office, right? So it's employers should remember that it is a very fact-specific inquiry, and it's probably the type of inquiry that they should really speak to a professional about and really talk through what they can and can't do or should or shouldn't do in their specific establishment.
Right. And so, but that also changes when it comes to a customer, because now LA City is asking that businesses check their customers. And if a customer says, I have a sincerely held religious belief that I can't get a vaccine, that is a difficult challenge with an employee to verify that, much less a customer who comes up and makes that claim. You know, how do employers go about evaluating that and what to do about it? Well, let's do one question at a time. How do employers go about evaluating that?
It is definitely very challenging. It's much more challenging than a medical condition. Medical condition usually comes with the doctor's note. Employers know what to do with it, and usually comes with what the reasonable accommodation needs to be. When we're looking at a sincerely held religious belief, religion is defined very, very broadly, and it doesn't include just the major religions that we're aware of. It also includes someone's personal beliefs. This doesn't include social or political beliefs, but really someone's personal religious beliefs. When you're dealing with an employee comes to you and says, hey, I'd like a reasonable accommodation based on this religious belief that I have, an employer should 100% engage in a good faith interactive process. This interactive process might mean, having the employee fill out a form, and the form states what the religious beliefs are, why it conflicts with the vaccination policy, what reasonable accommodation they're asking, and then engage in a dialogue with the employee to figure out what, if any, reasonable accommodations the employer can provide. The difference between doing this with an employee and a patron is, with an employee, you have quite a bit of time, right? With a patron, they're standing in front of you, say maybe at your store or establishment, and they're demanding an answer right then and there. So you don't have the luxury of time there. And so employers should really think about what sort of reasonable accommodations they can provide beforehand, depending on the type of establishment they have. And they should have a policy in place, right? What do they do when a patron comes and says, hey, I'd like a reasonable accommodation. This is my sincerely held religious belief. I think that establishments, at the very least, can at least ask the patron what their religious belief is. I think that's fine. And, the second part of it is it has to be sincerely held. That's the difficult part. It's really difficult to figure out within 30 seconds or a minute whether someone's belief is sincerely held or not. I think it's really important to have some sort of form for the patrons as well that has them attest under penalty of perjury why they're asking for a reasonable accommodation, whether it's medical or based on a sincerely held religious belief, and have them fill it out. And I think establishments should keep that on record in a confidential file. I think all establishments, whether they're dealing with employees or patrons, should remember that this information is confidential. It should not be shared, and it should 100% be in a confidential file.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things is thinking through what accommodations you can actually provide based upon your business. And that really is, as you mentioned, when we first got started today, that's really important because it's going to vary from business to business. And so one of the things that's important is that those accommodations that can be provided and that can be provided should be communicated, I think, to patrons in advance. So I think you can do that through social media. You can have a pop-up, on your website, letting your customers know that this is the LA City requirement, and this is what you could do for your customers who are and are not vaccinated.
That's 100%, I think, the right thing to do. In fact, starting October 21st, 6 days ago, businesses should have been displaying an advisory note that the proof of vaccination will be required beginning November 4th, 2021. So, I mean, I think, and even putting a notice on your website, I think is important, just practically speaking. So patrons know what to expect when they come to your establishment.
On every shift, you have one designated manager who handles those customers that cause issues and can write, a report regarding what the issue was. So you have it should any legal action come about later, or if the police need to be called, to deal with someone who becomes, unruly. I am sort of envisioning one of these viral videos coming about after November 4th because some restaurant or business refuses to allow someone who claims a religious belief or a medical condition into the facility.
I do think there was going to be a viral video. And also, it's really important to train your employees. And I think the person that the employee designates to be the person who's going to handle most of these requests for accommodations should be someone who has some time in their schedule, right? So it shouldn't be someone who's so busy that the patron's waiting outside for 15, 20 minutes. I think there should be a streamlined process. And that process should be part of the policy that any business develops. And all the employees should be any employee who actually interacts with customers should be really trained well with the policy. And then that one person should definitely be that person who has time to engage with patrons.
And all is not lost if you have to turn someone away. There are ways to accommodate that person, for example, by giving them the option of having takeout. If you have a restaurant, if you have a store that they can't come in, you might offer them 15% off on the website if they want to shop that way, or offer them free shipping. So there are things that you can do to pacify customers who aren't being allowed in the hopes that things don't escalate any further.
That's right. I actually know of a very famous store that I won't mention that actually the manager would come out and take your shopping list from you and then purchase all your products for you, would come back, get your credit card, and then run it. And I was like, well, this kind of sounds really great, actually. Please, someone do. I would love it if someone did my shopping for me.
Seriously. And that was a viral video too, if I recall.
Was it?
There was a viral video about that. So people can Google it.
Oh my gosh.
If they want. But yes, at the beginning of COVID, there was a viral video on that very issue.
I did not know that. That goes to show how much I know about things that are viral. But yes, I think all of that is so super important. I was kind of trying to figure out how to assist your patrons. The really good news, by the way, for establishments in the city of LA is 78% of all residents have received at least one dose of the COVID vaccination. So the hope is that in the next few weeks, they'll receive the next. And perhaps as patrons are going out and they're learning about this particular ordinance. And by the way, it's very possible that the first time somebody learns about this ordinance is when they visit your establishment. I think businesses should be prepared for that as well. But the hope is, as people are going out there and learning about this ordinance, that they do get vaccinated.
Yeah, and we're hoping that it's smooth for businesses. We really
Yes.
Truly do hope that it is, but there are always speed bumps, and it's also a little more difficult because LA County is not in line with Cal OSHA. They actually have stricter guidance, and so that also makes this path a little bit rocky for employers.
It does. Cal OSHA's guidance are not as strict, but employers should know that Cal OSHA specifically states that if there is a local guidance that is stricter, employers need to comply with it. In fact, if there's ever a stricter guidance, the employers always have to comply with the most strictest guidance. So it is definitely a rocky path, but that doesn't mean it's something employers and business establishments can't get through. I think like everything else that's happened with COVID, this too, I think, is something that employers will be able to work through.
Yep, and we hopefully successfully and can continue on in great prosperity in the future.
That's right. I'm a super process-oriented person, so I think the one thing I will say to employers is read this ordinance, create your process, create a flow chart, create your policies, create your forms. Don't wait for November 4th to come. Make sure you have something in place prior to that and practice with your employees, right? Practice makes perfect. Pretend to be a patron who's requesting an accommodation. How does a person handle this in real life? I think it's really important to be prepared. Preparation is always the key to success.
Yep. And I know you've been spending a lot of your time this week working on policies and forms for customers.
I sure have. And, I truly believe one size does not fit all. And so, different establishments have different needs, and they're going to need different sorts of forms and policies depending on where they are. A huge part of it is what is going to be the reasonable accommodation and how does the policy address it? So I've been spending a lot of time with our clients trying to figure out exactly what they need and how to put that in a policy that is not lawyer-like. It is a policy that your employees can understand, that your patrons can read and say, oh, that's what this says. And trying to make this transition and these requirements as easy for our clients to comply with as possible.
Saba, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. For those of you listening, if you have any questions, you can reach me at 3bsonthelaw@gmail.com. That's 3 spelled out, BS on the law @gmail.com. And Saba, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, first, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I really appreciate it. It was really a pleasure. Anyone who wants to reach me can reach me at S Zafar, and I'll spell that out. It's S as in Sam, Z as in zebra, A, F as in Frank, AR @bglawyers.com.
Awesome. And that's B as in boy, G as in girl, lawyers with an S.com. Thanks, Saba. Have a great evening.
You too.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this special episode of 3Bs on the Law. Thank you for joining us on today's podcast of 3Bs on the Law. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. We also welcome any comments. If you'd like to get in touch with us or suggest a future topic, you can email us at 3bsonthelaw@gmail.com. And because we're lawyers, we need to remind you that this podcast is not meant to provide you with legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.